Hi, I'm Spiders, and in 13 minutes I'll be covering all 13 Deepwoken oaths, what builds you should use them on, and how exactly to use them effectively. Let's get into it. Now the first oath up is Arc Order. Now Arc Order requires 20 Flame and 20 Thunder, which is pretty unique, so really I'd only recommend going this oath if you're already going either Flame Charm or Thunder Call, at least one of the two. Otherwise, the stat investment needed for this oath is probably not worth it. However, if you are going one of these attunements and happen to also be running a legendary weapon that can't be enchanted such as the Storm Scythe, this oath is even more worth it because of a talent called Arc Module Null, which basically makes it so that whenever you have your Arc suit up, you and your opponent's weapon enchants are both nullified. Since you already can't have a weapon enchant since you're on a legendary weapon, this kind of negates that downside and only helps you, and these days that's really the only kind of build I see people running Arc Order on. As for the mantras, the only real one that I could always recommend is running the Arc Suit. Now the Arc Suit is really just a free passive 10% damage reduction, which is obviously going to be super good. That helps for sure. And there's also a bunch of really good talents that go along with the Arc Suit. So yeah, definitely obviously run this mantra, everyone really knows that. The other two mantras are kind of up for debate though. First, the Arc Beam is just really slow, which makes it really hard to use in PvP since everyone's going to be able to react to it easily and it'll be really hard to land. So that's why it's really rare that you will see a top player using this mantra. Arc Wave is also not great for that same reason, but it's pretty good for overworld since it does have a pretty big AoE, so you can just put a Bloodless Gem on it and get free healing a lot of the time. So it does have some use there at least. These mantras are also not bad for PvE because they do get a damage boost because of how Arc Order works, but usually some of the other oaths that we'll get into later are better. So I still wouldn't really recommend it for that either. The next oath up is Blind Seer. Now right now, Blind Seer is actually a really good oath that can be run on a lot of different builds, but the strongest builds that run Blind Seer are going to be attunementless builds, usually also either running a light weapon or a strong medium weapon. The main reason for this is because you want to have a build that has a really strong play around its weapon, because when you go Blind Seer, you definitely want to be using Tranquil Circle. Tranquil Circle is just really strong right now and counters a ton of builds with this mantra disabling ability. Besides that, Mind Soothe is also really good for overworld, just super good support and healing, which is always going to be really strong. And the last mantra is Sightless Beam, which has a lot of potential in some specific situations. For example, it's pretty good in overworld because a lot of the time you can just catch people off guard when they're paying attention to other stuff, since overworld is pretty chaotic sometimes, so it can be pretty good there. This mantra can also be okay for 1v1s, but you really need to make sure that you know how to slide cast it and like jump around and use that tech in order to go behind someone's block when they try and block the mantra, so that definitely does require a bit of skill to learn. Overall, this oath is really good, and one last thing that I'd like to mention is that this oath has innate immunity to gaze, which is really good since a lot of people are using that these days. So that's another thing that makes this oath really strong. And next up we have Contractor. Now Contractor is one of the oaths that does not have any requirement, so if you don't like any of the other oaths or you can't fit it into your build, then that's when you should consider using this oath. Now the first mantra we have up is Lord Slice. Now Lord Slice did receive a damage nerf recently, but I still think it's pretty solid. If you have a good way of activating a tendril so you can use this mantra, such as having a good crit, it can still be useful and does a lot of posture damage and decent damage. But yeah, after the nerfs, I would definitely not say it's required to use this mantra anymore or anything. And yeah, same with the next mantra, Equalizer, which is a counter move that can set up pretty decent combos. But a while ago this also got nerfed, and now it is really hard to land, and you can get punished really hard due to its insane end lag, so I definitely would not recommend using this mantra for sure. However, the last mantra, Judgment, is pretty solid right now. It has a really reliable feint, really strong range, and it's really good for overworld as well because of its stunning ability, which you can use to combo with your teammates. This mantra also is able to auto grip people, which can occasionally be useful. But yeah, overall I would say if you're going this oath, you should definitely be going it for this mantra, so make sure you keep that in mind. Moving on, next up we have the new oath, Chain Warden. Now Chain Warden is also another no requirement oath, so just run it if you don't have any other options you want to go. Same thing as with the Contractor. Now the first mantra, Restrain, has a lot of unique abilities to it. For one, if you land it, it has like no cooldown, but honestly I don't think this is super useful since obviously like if you're using the same mantra over and over again, it's probably not going to work very well. Your opponent's going to learn very quickly what you're doing. Aside from that, Restrain is also really slow, and I wouldn't say it does amazing posture damage. So as a mantra in itself, in my opinion, is kind of weak. However, when you land this mantra, even if it hits block, it applies a chain, which is quite good and can be used with the next mantra as well. When your opponent has a chain on them, you can use the second mantra, Rupture, which launches them wherever you're looking, which kind of gets you some free damage and has the potential for combos. You can also just use this mantra normally without a chain, and it seems like a pretty decent close range attack that dazes. However, honestly, nothing crazy. So yeah, I guess if you have troubles with your opponent running away, you could use this oath. However, this oath did just come out, so it's kind of hard to say just how good it is, and whether or not it's worth using something like Jet Striker, which might be better for chasing people if you're having that issue. And the next oath we have is Dawnwalker, which is again another no requirement oath. Now in my opinion, all three of these mantras are good and usable for PvP. First one being Blinding Dawn. Now Blinding Dawn has a really big AoE, so it can be decent in overworld, getting that free blood stealing just like with Arc Wave like we explained earlier. This mantra is also not horrible in one, since it has a good chance of hitting at least one tick and activating some Dawnwalker talents. Overall, this mantra isn't super impactful, but if you have nothing else to run, you can definitely go with it. And also, it's really good for PvE, since it does really high damage. And next up, we have Radiant Kick, which is definitely, in my opinion, the strongest mantra out of Dawnwalker. Radiant Kick is just a quick mantra with pretty solid damage and pretty strong range as well. and it's just really quick and reliable to use. It doesn't really have that much unique stuff about it, but just really solid in PvP, so definitely run this if you plan on making a PvP build with Dawnwalker. And lastly, we have Radiant Dawn. Now in the past, there's been a lot of ways to confirm this mantra and make it unavoidable, but right now there's not a lot of common ways to do that. But if you are able to discover something, then definitely take advantage of that if you want to. This mantra does quite high damage and is unparryable and unblockable, but it's really slow and hard to get yourself in situations where it actually lands. So that's why you really gotta look out for that. But overall, not a horrible mantra. And yeah, that's basically it. Dawnwalker also has some pretty strong talents, but they're basically passive and you don't really need to do much or change your playstyle in any way to effectively use them. And next oath we have up is Fate Trimmer, which is another no requirement oath. Now obviously this is kind of a troll oath, so it's not really great right now, but honestly if you're too lazy to get the other oaths, the mantras are still usable. The first mantra we have up is Close Shave, which is pretty similar to the medium mantra Prominence Draw, and it's just an okay gap closer. Besides that, there's one other mantra being Precision Cuts, which is just kind of mediocre I'd say. It's really easy to parry, and after its damage got nerfed, it's really nothing crazy, and not that good in my opinion. However, this oath does have another ability being Hair Products, which can either light your target on fire, charm them, or heal them. There's only really specific situations where the flame or charming effects are useful, so I definitely say that the healing ability is the best, and you can use that to help your teammates in ganks, but you do have to get really close to your teammate and get them to stand still, so keep that in mind. But yeah, overall this is kind of a troll oath, so it shouldn't be any surprise that's kind of mediocre. But if you like it, it is no requirement, so go it if you want to. And the next oath we have is definitely one of the strongest oaths right now, and that is Jet Striker, which requires 50 agility. And because of this 50 agility requirement, on most builds you'll probably have to go out of your way to get this. But a lot of the time, in my opinion, this is definitely worth it, and Jet Striker is really strong on light and medium weapon builds. Moving on to the mantras, the first one we have up is Fake Strike. Now, top players have really mixed opinions on whether or not this mantra is good, but in my opinion, I think it's pretty solid and just another feint. Now really, for this mantra, the ideal time that you want to be using it is in combos when you think your opponent's going to parry. The reason for that is because this mantra is really good with hit stun, since when your opponent misses their parry, you can get some guaranteed hits on them, which is really where you'll see this mantra at its full potential. But that does take quite a lot of skill to learn, so be sure to keep that in mind. The second and last mantra this oath has is Jet Kick, which most people would say is really strong right now. It does really solid damage and is also pretty quick, which just makes it a super good and consistent and strong mantra. And if you're going Jet Striker, you should definitely run it. It's sort of like an upgraded Gale Lunge or Ice Lance or something like that. And even past the mantras, this oath has a ton of different talents that play around mobility and just help you overall with moving around and being quick and escaping situations when you need to. So all of these reasons combined make Jet Striker super solid right now. And in my opinion, if you want to make a meta build that's really strong, this is definitely the oath you should consider. Now the next oath we have up is Oathless, which is another no requirement oath. Now Oathless is one of the highest skill and most complex oaths in the game that could honestly take hundreds, if not thousands of hours to learn. I'm playing, but Oathless is really one of the simplest oaths out there. All you get is just plus 10 health, plus 20% oath resistance, and plus 2 wildcard mantra slots. That's it. That's all you get for it. Very simple. Obviously, because these are just stats, there's really no skill to this oath, and you can just play the game normally as if this oath didn't exist. But honestly, if you're thinking about running this oath, I would really say just to run one of the other no requirement oaths instead, since there are a lot of really strong no requirement oaths in the game right now. So I really don't think it's worth it to go oathless just for these stat benefits. But of course, that's always up to you. And if you really don't want to run any of the oath mantras, then you could run oathless. And finally, we have the last no requirement oath being Link Strider. Now, Link Strider is primarily a support oath, so you want to use it to support your teammates. And one main way you do that is with its first mantra being Symbiotic Link. Basically, you just put this on your allies and it gives them a bunch of buffs, being a speed boost, a 20% damage resistance, and a 5% damage increase, which is all pretty solid. Also, you can put this on enemies and it just gives them a speed debuff. I'd say using this mantra is pretty simple, just try and stick close to your allies so you can keep this active and it will be helpful. Another mantra we have is Symbiotic Sustain. What this mantra basically does is sacrifice 7% of your health to heal 15% of your allies' health. And you know, just putting the numbers together, that's definitely worth it, and overall you get more HP from it. So yeah, again, just another really good support mantra, but you probably want to make sure your build has some sort of way to recover your health, whether that's just by using campfires or maybe having an iceberg or something, whatever works for you. And lastly, we have Parasitic Leech, which allows you to heal from your enemies. Now basically with this mantra, you kind of just want to use it and dance around your opponent and try not to get hit, so you can sustain yourself and just keep healing off them, be really annoying. There's some weird tech you can do with this, like using Metal Rampart to get away from them and be really annoying like that, but it's sort of up to you to figure out what works with your build. Also, this mantra is super good for PvE and you can heal a ton with it, so make sure to keep that in mind. It says that Link Strider also has a really good convenient talent being Entropy Link, which basically allows you to sit at the campfire and teleport to places. So kind of just a quality of life thing about this oath. The next oath is Salt Chemist, which has a pretty high 75 intelligence requirement. Because of this high requirement, I'd really only suggest going this oath if you're willing to get the other stuff that comes with intelligence, such as prediction, or I guess if you really want to be cheesy and get bombs too, but I'll be kind of disappointed in you. Now, of course, this oath is based all around potions, and there is a ton of versatility in that. But starting with the stuff the Salt Chemist gives you that's different from normal, you have Biotic Salts, which makes it so your positive effects don't apply to your enemies. You have Aromantic Salts, which makes your potions kind of linger in an area. And you have Antithetic Salts, which invert your potion's effects. Now like I said, there is a ton of versatility here, so I can't really fit all of that into one video. But some of the potions that I recommend looking into are the health regen potion, since regen in this game is super good and it's better than the instant health potion since it gives more healing. Another good potion is the posture damage buff potion, since it makes you do more posture damage of course, which is really good in a lot of situations and with certain monsters as well. And one more good one that I'll mention is the ether regen potion, which you can invert the effects of using the antithetic salts I mentioned earlier. And most people also combine this with the aromantic salts, which make it linger in an area. And this potion is really solid since it just disables your opponent's mantras and is really annoying to deal with. But yeah, there's definitely more good potions that I didn't mention, but it's kind of up to you to figure out what you like and what works for you. There's a ton of versatility, so this is a really interesting oath that you can really do a lot with if you're creative. And next up is Silent Heart. Now Silent Heart, obviously you want to run it on builds that focus on your weapon, and since you're giving up your mantras, you have to rely a lot more on your weapon. But as for what Silent Heart itself gives you, first we have Ankle Cutter. The Ankle Cutter is honestly really strong, it has a ton of range, and is a super good option from neutral. But yeah, because of this range, you want to make sure you're keeping your distance with it and keeping yourself safe while using it, because people will try to M1 you during it a lot. And besides that, you also have Mani Kadi, which is definitely one of the best roll catchers in the game. If you notice that your opponent is parrying the air a lot or air rolling, you really want to be able to punish them with this mantra. And when you predict your opponent's going to make one of those mistakes, you should try and catch them with it. Also, Mani Kadi's posture damage scales with what weapon type you have, so it'll do 5 with light weapon, 6 with medium, and 7 with heavy. So be sure to watch out for that. And one last ability you get from Silent Heart is Vengeful Pursuit, which I think is really good since there's literally no way to tell when this is off cooldown for your opponent, and it just looks like a normal running M1, so this can catch a lot of people off guard if you know how to use it properly. But yeah, Silent Heart is probably relatively weak right now, and I don't see it often at all in Top Chime. It's actually really rare now, so be sure to keep that in mind. Now the next oath we have up is Dark Kindred, which requires 40 strength. A lot of the time you just get this on your build anyway post shrine, so it's fine, but sometimes you do have to change your stats for it, but it's not too bad for 40 strength. Now probably the best thing about this oath is the wings that it gives you, which really boosts your air dashes and give you some pretty great mobility, especially in overworld. Aside from that, it has 3 mantras, which are probably relatively weak right now in my opinion. First one is Ascension, which has a super long windup, but is unparryable or blockable, and has knockdown. However, even with all that, in my opinion, the long windup is just too much, and it really hurts this mantra and makes it almost unusable and unlandable. Next up, in my opinion, the best mantra out of the 3 is Celestial Assault. Now, Celestial Assault does 2 hits, the first of which is basically an uppercut, which launches you and your opponent in the air. And the second hit is kind of like a horizontal slash, which is optional, and you can feint before this happens and just do the first hit. And that is what I would recommend doing most of the time, because the second hit has some insane end lag, and you can get punished a ton for that, so you really need to watch out. If you use the full mantra, that end lag can really hurt you. And the last mantra you get is Sinister Halo. Now this is a multi-hit mantra, which is okay, but you really don't get much out of it. It's just really hard to get any big benefit from this mantra. So in my opinion, this isn't great either. The last oath we have is Vision Shaper. Now Vision Shaper requires 50 charisma, so you'll probably have to go out of your way to get this, but you can also pick up the 75 charisma talents, then you try to border, you know, get it that way, something like that. Now I'd only really suggest using Vision Shaper on cheese builds right now, since it's pretty weak in most situations. This build has 3 mantras, the first of which, and really the big one that people focus on, is the Illusory Servants. Now, this mantra summons a clone that'll do damage to your opponent and just be really annoying, and sometimes on some weapons you can use its crit, which can be really powerful sometimes, especially on a good weapon like the Kyre Seeker. The second mantra we have is Illusory Realm. Now this mantra, the way most people use it is just using it at 1 HP, since you can't get knocked in this mantra, so when you're at 1 HP you can use it kind of clutch and try and save yourself for a little while. But besides that, it's also pretty solid since it makes your clone do true damage and makes your illusory counter also do true damage as well, so that's another benefit to it. And the last mantra we have is Illusory Counter, which basically just spawns a clone whenever you're hit during it. It's pretty simple, but it's not a bad counter, so use it if you want to, it's up to you. But yeah, overall though, like I said, this oath is pretty weak after the nerfs, and you only really want to use it on specific builds. And that was everything. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more top content. See you in the next one.